What is your opinion on Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists? I've heard that Mosley and his blackshirts received much support from English Catholics because of how similar his ideology was to Catholic social teaching. Is there any truth to this?
Whose was the face that launched 1,000 ships? Sir Oswald Mosley or Sir Stafford Cripps? Well, Sir Stafford Cripps was a Labour politician. All right, Sir Oswald Mosley, British Union of Fascists. Sir Oswald Mosley was a baronet. I've met his son, actually, who had not heard that rhyme I just recited for you.
Oh.
Now he has, so it's part of his life, I guess. But Sir Oswald was a baronet, member of Parliament, who had been conservative, was very much turned off by the conservative lack of response to the Depression and the plight of the working classes. Kind of like Edward VIII when he was king, going into the Welsh coal mining and getting everybody so upset by saying something needs to be done. You know, the Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, was very annoyed that the king would have had an opinion about anything. Well, similarly, Sir Oswald was very upset by this. So he formed he left the Conservative Party and joined the Labour Party, becoming a socialist, in hopes of improving the lot of the working man and so forth. But then he came to the conclusion that Labour was no better than the Tories. They were just another bunch of hack politicians. And he created what was called the New Party, that lasted for a year or so. But what's happening in the meantime? Well, in the meantime, in Italia, in 1922, you had the March on Rome, which brought into power Benito Mussolini. Now, we only think of Mussolini as the evil ally of Hitler who led his country to ruin. But it's important to remember that in the 1920s, he was the man who kept the Depression from entering Italy. Italy, who, since unification, been looked on as something of a clownish state, been defeated by the Ethiopians. What do you say about a European power defeated by Ethiopia?
That's embarrassing.
It was very embarrassing. It was extremely embarrassing. It really stuck in the Italian craw.
Yeah.
And nobody less than Mussolini, which is why when they went to conquer Ethiopia in 1936, they were so gleeful about it, because they'd been made to look like morons in front of the whole of Europe. Well, anyway, he, apart from making the trains run on time, which everyone gets excited about, he spared Italy, his rule and his policy spared Italy the worst effects of the Depression, which you couldn't say for Roosevelt or Ramsay MacDonald or anybody else in Europe at the time. So Mosley looked at him, as a lot of other people did, including FDR, as perhaps something of a model to follow. And he started the British Union of Fascists in emulation. He turned the New Party into a fascist party. Now, the Catholic involvement was not great, but there was some. And the reason for this was because of the resemblance of parts of the fascist program and parts of Mosley's program to elements of Catholic social teaching. Specifically, Quadragesimo Anno called for what is called corporatism, or the corporate state. Now, what that basically means is that rather than being organized necessarily geographically, with no other connecting interest, the electorate be involved according to profession. So you would have these corporations, and they'd be a bit like the medieval guilds, in the sense that they would, at least as far as the Catholic concept was, they would look after your religious life, but they would include labor, capital, retail of any given industry. So like the shoe company, the shoe business, you would unite in one corporation the mass manufacturers of shoes, the shoe stores, the shoe specialty shops, and the United Shoe Workers. And all these would be in a single corporation, which would be represented in Parliament.
Interesting.
So in other words, your voting and all that would be on the basis not of simply where you lived, but what you do.
I like that.
Well, it lent itself to a lot of things. But the problem, and corporatism was also very closely allied to what was called in English guild socialism, A.J. Penty, and distributism and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about corporatism, though, is that it doesn't really work purely as an economic system divorced from every other consideration. It needs an overarching philosophy behind it to animate it, to give it a reason for being.
Mm.
For Catholic social teaching purposes, it was the faith. For Mussolini, it was the state. And for Hitler, who adopted some of the corporatist ideas, it was the race. But unfortunately, as a result of World War II, corporatism got a dirty name. It was tarred with the Nazi brush. And of course, anything that's tarred with the Nazi brush must be Nazi. Just like any country allied with Joseph Stalin must have been communist.
We were. Okay, moving on.
Yeah. I don't like it when you force my face into that kind of stuff. But, yeah, so at any rate, that there were some Catholics who supported Sir Oswald, but he never had anything like a majority of Catholic support. He did have one important disciple who was Catholic named William Joyce, who was actually an American citizen, but he fled Britain for Germany in the outbreak of war, and became a radio announcer doing German propaganda. And he was called Lord Haw Haw. That was his nickname. And he would begin every show with Berlin calling.
Interesting. Okay.
And he spoke with a very cut glass accent. Oh, that's the other thing. Sir Oswald and Lady Mosley, having become close to Mussolini, eventually became close to Hitler himself. And so many years later, after Mosley had died, I heard Lady Mosley interviewed on the radio. And they said, well, you know, Lady Mosley, you met Hitler, what did you think of him? And she said, he was a perfect dare.
A perfect what?
Dare.
I don't know what that is. Deer?
Yes.
Oh, perfect deer.
A perfect dare.
Okay.
She was unreconstructed.
Oh, well, that goes without saying.
Yeah. Personally, I think if you're going to call somebody a perfect dare, they probably should not be Adolf Hitler.
Probably.
I would consider him a man of the people, but I don't mean it as a compliment.
Yeah.